Well, my friends, today we are in Desmet, South Dakota. It says the Wilder life because the Ingalls and Wilders lived here, and the Ingalls are buried here. Well, today we're at Desmet Cemetery, and if you saw my last vlog where we were at the Laura Ingalls Wilder Museum, this guy, Eric, gave us one of the best tours I've had anywhere, and he volunteered to take us out to the cemetery and show us not only where the Ingalls are buried, but other people mentioned in the book. So, Eric, tell us about yourself and how people can come take a tour with you.
Yeah. Well, I own the bed and breakfast in town and started working with the Memorial Society about 3 years ago and fell in love with the story and keep learning every day. So
that's amazing. Whose grave are we at now?
This is Louis Bucci. He is Mr. Brewster in her books.
Ah, but he's actually, you were showing us a little bit ago.
Yeah, he's actually on this side. This is his brother over here.
And
he's the guy who got chased around his house with a knife.
Yeah, and Laura was a teacher for his kids. And who else is here?
And this is Thomas Brown over here. He's the first person buried in our cemetery.
And you said there is a little bit of a tie-in to Laura's stories and him being the first one here.
Yes, well, they put the cemetery here because it overlooked Brown's Hill, which is right to our south here. That's where Laura and Amanzo were married by Reverend Brown.
And she also talks about the long winter, and this guy was a victim of it, right?
Yes, he is. I don't know if he's the first victim, but he's the first one anyway that spurred the controversy of where do we put a cemetery, because now we have someone to put in it. He fell in his well during the winter and wasn't found for several days, and so then they decided we need to come up with a cemetery.
So the Ingalls are actually further back in the cemetery, so we're going to drive it. But originally, and I know he'll tell you this, originally Pa was the only one with a grave here. The rest were unmarked. He'll tell you why. And they have signs all over the place that will guide you to find the family.
You should see the sunsets out here.
I bet.
And again, not related, well, sort of related to her story. Mr. and Mrs. Ferguson, who owned their house afterwards, are right here.
All the ones who put all their belongings on the front yard. Wow. That would have been...
Maud and George.
And then there are the Ingalls over here.
And here's the family. That's actually Carrie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because Carrie actually took her mother's name, Carolyn. But to distinguish the two, she called herself Carrie.
Seen the other video what Carrie's life was like a little bit?
Yeah, Carrie ends up working in newspapers a good portion of her time, then moves to Keystone, where she runs a newspaper for a while there, and she marries her husband, David Swansea. David was a widower, and so when he passed away, he's buried with his first wife and his children out in Keystone.
Okay.
So,
didn't you say she was the first writer of...
Yeah, she worked for our Desmet newspaper for 10 years.
Very
so
cool.
Would love to know what she actually wrote, but you know, back then they didn't put authors to who wrote the articles. So.
And then who is next to...
Then there's Mary. Well, in the TV show, they make her out to start a blind school, get married, have a child, all kinds of things. Unfortunately, no, she stays here most of her life. She stays around the house and helps Ma out with the chores and has a kind of a quiet life here in Desmet for the rest of her life.
And then you said after Carolyn passed away, her sisters came back, correct?
Yeah, they help her out for a couple of years at the house, and then she moves in with Carrie for about 1.5 years. Unfortunately, then at the end of that, in 1928, she has several strokes and she passes away, unfortunately. This is Laura and Almanzo's baby son. He must have been very ill when he was born. He really only lived just about 3.5 weeks, and then he passes away. And he's buried out here with the family.
So sad, especially when you think of Charles having the same problem where he lost his only son.
Yeah, there's a history that even Rose had a son, apparently a miscarriage, and it was a son.
Now,
so there was some issue with having boys in the family, I guess.
I was kind of shocked because you were saying how big Charles' family was. It was like 14 family members or something as far as his.
Oh, between the two families, yeah. It had all kinds of aunts and uncles, and
but yet, when it came to grandkids, they had one amongst all of them.
Yeah. Well, but the other kids made up for it. They really made up for it. They had lots. I can't even keep track of all the people on the other sides of the family.
So he would have actually been born before Rose. Is that true?
So after
Rose.
After.
Okay.
About a year after. Yep. There's Carolyn.
Who are the stories correct that she was a teacher herself and courted liked Charles and was chasing after Charles and won him over, I guess? Or he says on the show, I just say that she threw a picnic and won him over. Do we know how they actually met? Or?
That part, I'm not really sure about that part of the story. I really don't know.
Now, what was her... You told me that she actually lived over 20 years after Paul
22
passed.
years after her husband passes away.
What was her life like? What did she do?
Well, she rented out rooms of the house to people, and she also sold her produce and goods. And Mary would help out with bills also. She would do horse fly nets that you put over horses to keep the flies off of them. They would sell those in town and sell her fruits and vegetables in town. I would imagine she did cooking and any kind of odd job she could find that was kind of domestic around there.
And she never remarried?
No, she never did.
Now, you told us, which I thought was really fascinating, that they did not always have graves here, or they were not always marked.
Correct. This was actually done in 1969. Rose, at the time, had just taken over her mother's estate after she passed away. And she was in contact with us here at the Society, and there was a lot of interest in Laura, of course, right around that time period. And the graves weren't marked. So none of these here were here except for Charles. And it wasn't till Rose paid for the headstones and the Society did the rest of the work here. We put the feet down here and roped it off so that people would stop walking.
So they would actually be kind of buried right here.
Yeah, right here.
But just to appease the
yes,
the others here.
Right. And Charles was given a Mason funeral. And so they paid for his headstone. It was actually done in November of 1902. They paid $72 for this headstone, Mason's funeral.
How accurate is I know, we've talked about how Laura herself said some of the books were embellished by the editors and things like that, but what do we know about Charles? Was he really that guy? Because we hear stories, in the books of him needing shoes, yet he goes to town, finds out they need $3 to get the bell, and he gives that money for his shoes. Is he really that guy?
I wish we knew more. I really do. I think he's fascinating.
Because I know...
But every
kid's going to idolize their dad,
certainly.
Usually, so that's why I asked.
But at the end of the day, he stuck with his family the entire time. He always tried to provide more than he could give himself all the time. I think in the end he made it, but we don't know a ton about him. He didn't write a lot. Got a little journal, but there's not much in it.
I was going to ask you that.
But talk about jack of all trades. He worked for the railroad. He was a butcher. He was a farmer. He was a hunter. He was a furniture maker. He was a carpenter. He was
house builder, church builder.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sheriff,
Justice of the Peace.
Justice of the Peace. I mean, talk about a wide spectrum of things he could do.
And it's amazing if you think about it. You mentioned on your tour, you told us so much stuff. I mean, I couldn't even begin to tell people how much we learned. But one of the things you said is one year their crops got totally decimated by like the worst locust storm ever, where and afterward he still didn't leave that plot of land and said, you know, we'll make it. We'll, in the
Still
books
wanted to
anyway,
try.
he says we'll come back and we'll beat them, and they stay on that property.
We know he was always positive and looked at the positive things in life. And, you know, when he was feeling down, he pulled out his fiddle and started playing.
Yeah. And
So-
it says a lot about him when he thought he couldn't provide them because he's afraid they won't be able to find game. So many people have got there, and you're like, this is a guy who was not afraid to go into Indian territory, unknown territories, to build a new life.
Yeah, and he wanted a better life.
I think
he did it. So
I had read that he had kind of itchy feet. Do you know anything about that? Like he didn't like to be in the same place after a couple of years, or was it they moved by necessity?
I think it's more a necessity. If you follow the stories that Laura handed down and the family handed down, I think it was more out of necessity. We do know that he wanted to move on to Oregon. I think that had something to do with the climate out here.
That's what I was wondering, because he always talks about how beautiful going west and how...
And to be fair, a lot of farmers left this area because it was tough. It was really tough to make a crop out here.
3-day blizzards, I can't imagine.
Yeah, and the winters are brutal. So, yeah, I can see him wanting to go further on because he heard that it was better out there. And I think Carolyn probably put her foot down when she got here and said, I have a house now. We're not leaving.
So they really they made a couple of homes here, and they were here probably longer than, is it true, longer than anywhere else?
Yep.
So
they were here
truly
from
was their home.
1879 all the way, well, if you count Mary, all the way up to 1926.
What ended up causing him to pass away? Because I want to tell other people, if you didn't see the tour, you actually show us the bedroom that he passed in.
Yeah.
In the house that he built.
Yep.
So
it's a heart failure. And
Oh, wow.
we don't know if he had some other kind of condition. You know, back then they didn't necessarily do autopsies and all that. So it was ruled as heart failure. So
it's amazing we learned on this tour from you that he's considered the town founder here as well.
Yeah, he's the first, the Ingalls family are the first family who stayed here. There's some other people who went in and out. We know that even Almanzo and his brother Wilder, or Royal, whoops, Royal actually were here before the Ingalls.
Oh,
and
really?
they filed on some claims, but they left.
Oh,
They didn't
okay.
come back until that next spring. So there was quite a few that did that, but they're the ones who stayed. So they are credited as being the founders.
How many visitors would you guess you guys get to come out here that care about the Ingalls, or people that want to know about the gravesite, as far just to give people a scope?
I'm just guessing here because there's so many entities. You know, there's the pageant, and then we have our Memorial Society, and then we have the homestead.
Yeah, you guys, this town
And
does events all year, right? For
we do
people
all
to come
kinds of
enjoy.
stuff. Yeah. And so all I'm guessing is probably 15, 20,000 people a year.
Wow. For a family who the writer we know passed in 57. So it's been that long since somebody's been alive.
Yeah, and it still draws that many people.
That's
Yes.
amazing. Is this a newer headstone, or is this the original headstone?
We just had this recut.
Okay, because I was like,
2 years
trying to
ago.
read it.
Yeah, before that, it was really dark, and you could barely read it. And so we had it recut. Rose also had it recut at the same time she did these. This actually used to sit over here, and they moved this in 1972
Okay.
because originally we had this, and this was over here, so they thought, let's bring it all together. So
That makes sense. That absolutely makes sense. Rest in peace, Ingalls family, Charles Ingalls. And like you said, Laura's the only one, Laura and Rose and Almanzo were the only ones in the family that did not get buried out here. So if you go to watch my video on Mansfield, you will see their graves in there. Charles Ingalls.
just because that was reserved for the Ingalls family,
Yeah.
and she got married to Dow. And so there's some other Dows here, which I can't find right now, but there's some other Dows, and he wanted to have his own plot for his family. So that's why she and he are over here.
This is Grace Ingalls, who became Grace Dow. She was the baby.
I might be wrong. It might be her manuscript. I can't remember if it's the manuscript or not. But
You said he had the opera house or built the
yep,
opera house?
or Ward Store and Bakery today. Yep.
Wow.
Fuller's Hardware Store was actually owned by him and his brother. And it was Gerald, I think, is his brother's name. They both owned it for a while, but Laura thought that would confuse people, so it becomes just Mr. Fuller.
Oh.
I don't know if she actually mentions them by their first name, come to think of it. I think she just says the Wilmerth boys. In the TV show, I think, like, Charles and Mr. Boast apparently hung out all the time.
Okay.
So they never worked in a lumber yard.
Yeah.
But they started working on the railroad together, and they came out here. Yeah, and they were friends out here for the rest of their lives.
Neat.
Yep. And here's Robert. I've always wondered why.
You know anything about, they said that Charles would take in people that needed help and let them stay and things like that, like kind of
He was very
adopt people?
He was very hospitable, very. Mr. and Mrs. Loftus, and he's the guy who tried to price gouge everybody when Amanzo and Cap Garland come back with the grain, and he tries to make up his losses, and so he charges twice as much. And this is when Charles goes over and has a discussion with him, and he lowers his prices back down to cost.
I love all the stories connected to these people.
They're fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, his wife Laura here dies early, and so he moves back to his family in, I think it's Wisconsin, I can't remember. But he moves back there because he's got some other family there.
Okay.
And a first wife there, and a second wife there, and he's buried back there with her.
He was the first reverend of their church.
Yeah, he married Laura and Almanzo.
Oh, and he married Laura and Almanzo. Yeah, that's
But the
amazing.
Congressional Church wanted to honor him for all his contributions. He's the one who helped create the cemetery.
Wonderful.
He was the first director of the cemetery right here. He owned the furniture shop in town. He's the first undertaker here in town. The rumor is that he hated doing it, and he had to get himself drunk to do it because he didn't like it.
Wow.
A poor guy. He didn't like that.
I wouldn't like it either.
But he was a furniture maker, so he made all the coffins.
Oh.
But he ran a very successful furniture store. In fact, he becomes, I forget what his title is, but he's a big retailer in South Dakota, becomes part of the commission of retailers in South Dakota. And he worked in his store all the way up to, I think, to 1936. Wow. I think he's in his 90s when he passes away. And I could be wrong about his age, but he outlives everybody else. 1938. He was here for a long time and did a lot of things for the town.
Laura's first teacher. That's awesome.
Here's her sister, Lavinia. Yeah, and she wrote back to our newspaper editor saying, because he asked her how her trip was, and she said, well, it's so different than the way she remembered it. And all the people she once knew are all gone. And the very first person she mentions out of the list of names to come up is Cap Garland. The Desmet News. Carrie worked for his father. Carter Sherwood, where's Carter? Carter, right here. Carrie worked for his father.
Oh, Carrie. Oh, so that was she. And of course, you were telling us that she was the first writer, wrote for the town paper here.
Well, Sherwood did most of the writing. But here's another one of the Nellies, Genevieve Masters.
You said there were 3 girls that basically made up the Nellie story.
This is the second one.
Genevieve Masters. Right here.
One of the Nellies.
Well, Eric, I can't thank you enough for
showing
us around the tour that you gave today. Can you tell people where they can find you if they want to take the tour, and also the name of your bed and breakfast if they want to stay? And
oh, sure. Yeah, we have the Prairie House Manor Bed and Breakfast, and I work at the Laura Ingalls Wilder Memorial Society.
And that was pretty amazing tour. For those of you that may not have seen that video, go find the video that I made. We get to see the surveyor's house they move into. We get to see the school that they went to, and we get to see a remake of the school that Laura would have taught in. So it's an amazing tour. Like I said earlier in that video, I might have learned more on this tour than I have anything else, any other tour. So thank you so much.
Sure. Anytime.